Welcome to Politics Nation. I'm Al Sharpton. Tonight's lead, the Republican Party's contempt for the American people. GOP lawmakers are on the verge of holding the Attorney General of the United States in contempt of Congress for the first time ever. They're likely to cast that momentous vote tomorrow in what will go down in history, a disgraceful abuse of power and waste of time. Perfectly fitting for John Boehner's right-wing Tea Party Congress. The so-called gun-walking programs were actually started during the Bush administration, but the Republicans, prodded by the National Rifle Association, are peddling a conspiracy theory that Fast and Furious was cooked up by President Obama in order to take away gun rights. Here's what the head of the NRA last night.
An attempt to seek political advantage and in an attempt to enact more gun control laws on honest American citizens and use this whole issue politically against the Second Amendment in the United States.
The Republican now leading the charge against Eric Holder, Congressman Darrell Issa, mimicked the talking point earlier this year.
Could it be that what they really were thinking of was, in fact, to use this walking of guns in order to promote an assault weapons ban? Many think so. If you don't think that this Fast and Furious and things like it are the beginning of an attack in a second term on the Second Amendment, you really haven't evaluated this president.
And now the NRA is using its political muscle to threaten lawmakers, including Democrats, into voting for contempt. And it's an outrage.
Why is the NRA wading in to a contempt issue? This seems wholly inappropriate and far removed from the gun issue, unless this is really all about politics.
If he was a prosecutor, this would be prosecutorial misconduct.
It is a political hatchet job, and I believe the American people are disgusted with Congress.
She's right. The American people are disgusted with Congress. They want jobs and health care and safe retirement. Instead, Republican lawmakers have been selling conspiracy theories and persecuting the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the country. It's all part of the GOP plan. A recent book that revealed that top Republicans met just hours after the inauguration to work on a plot to bring down the president. They agreed to try to, quote, win the spear point of the House in 2010 and then jab Obama relentlessly in 2011. That's exactly what they're doing now with this vote. Even before Congressman Issa took over the Oversight Committee last year, he announced plans to hold hundreds of hearings against the Obama administration. Part of what critics said was a witch hunt worthy of Joe McCarthy. It's wrong and it's a shame, but it is what Republicans in Congress have become. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He's a former federal prosecutor who's been outspoken in Holder's behalf. And Dana Milbank, columnist for the Washington Post, who was at a congressional hearing today setting the rules for tomorrow's contempt vote. Thank you both for joining me this evening. Congressman, let me start with you. How do you explain this vote?
Well, unfortunately, I explain it as what it is, merely a partisan exercise. It's pretty clear that the Fast and Furious investigation, which had a legitimate start, I mean, there are legitimate concerns about this gun-walking issue, has become completely unmoored from what it began and has now become really a political exercise. And I think the NRA wading into it, making this a scored vote. In other words, if you want a perfect score with the NRA, then you got to vote this way on a contempt issue, only further politicizes this. I think it's fascinating that Chairman Issa today acknowledged what we all know, which is there's no evidence that the Attorney General was even aware of this gun-walking operation. And if that's the case, and the chairman admits that, then what is this contempt about? Except for a time-consuming waste of money and resources.
Now, explain what the political pressure is from your colleagues when the NRA says that if you want to get a perfect score from us, you're going to vote contempt.
Well, the pressure is immense. I mean, in a great many districts where the gun issue has tremendous these members are really quite terrified of not having a good NRA record. And the NRA, of course, knows this. They want to put those members in the untenable position between having to choose between, really a frivolous contempt vote, a bogus contempt vote, a partisan contempt vote on the one hand, or voting against the NRA on the other hand. That's exactly the kind of position the NRA wants to put these members, a lot of them vulnerable members, in. But it is a terrible politicization of what ought to be a sober process. This is a contempt power that ought to be used very scrupulously under very rare circumstances, and certainly not just as yet another partisan tool in a political campaign effort.
Well, that if it's not a political tool from the beginning. But Dana, you were there today in the hearing. Chairman Issa, you just heard Congressman Schiff. Chairman Issa admitted that the Attorney General may not have even known about this?
Yes, he said that he doesn't believe that he knew anything specific about it. And he also said the documents he's requesting, the things at the heart of this, actually aren't about the program. He said those words today. It's about what the Justice Department did after this whole program was already shut down. Now, earlier today, House Speaker Boehner was out there saying, we are all about jobs. We're all focusing on jobs. And the next thing they do is go and schedule this vote on holding a sitting Attorney General in contempt for the first time in American history. I don't think it's any coincidence that they scheduled this vote on a day that we're all going to be talking about the Supreme Court and health care, because I think they realize this is completely off message with what they should be talking about right now.
Well, you all, I think I'll be talking about both. But let me ask you this, Dana. How do you in any way justify the fact that if the chairman of the committee, Mr. Issa, who's been the main lead on this, admits that the Attorney General may not have and probably didn't know about this, and this is not about the documents they're questioning, has nothing to do with the program or the death of the ATF agent, then how could we be talking about holding the Attorney General of the United States in contempt tomorrow, something that has never happened in history, when he admits the man maybe didn't know about it and the documents in question have nothing to do with the death of this man, as well as the program, when you've got everybody running around saying, don't you care about the death of the man, when obviously all of us do.
Right, and now there are questions being raised in the press about whether the program itself was all of the evil things that it was thought to be in the first place. But look, the one thing the Republicans, I suppose, can say is that there's nothing going to come of this contempt vote anyway, so they can go out and have this spectacle tomorrow. And of course, Eric Holder's Justice Department is not going to prosecute Eric Holder for being in contempt of Congress. If we're going to hold people in contempt of Congress, there would be tens of millions of Americans who they'd have to lock up for that. But that's perhaps not the best excuse for holding this spectacle in the first place.
Well, Congressman Schiff and Dana, I want you to hold it right there a minute. You mentioned it's up in the press about the whole program, so I want to bring in now and talk to someone who wrote a stunning new report, and I mean stunning, for Fortune magazine that calls into question virtually everything Republicans have been saying about Fast and Furious. Now, this article is a result of a 6-month investigation, and it concludes that the right-wing's version of the case is, quote, replete with distortions, errors, partial truths, and even some outright lies, end of quote. In fact, Fortune says the central premise of ICE's investigation, that ATF agents under Fast and Furious deliberately let guns go across the border, is a myth. Fortune article says, quote, they insist they never purposely allowed guns to be illegally trafficked. They seized weapons whenever they could, but were hamstrung by prosecutors and weak laws, which stymied them at every turn. Joining me now is the Fortune contributor who wrote this piece. What was Fast and Furious if it wasn't some program to go and let the bad guys walk across the border with guns, because that's what the American public has been led to believe. And after reading your exhausting report, you're saying that wasn't even what the program was.
Right. People keep calling it a program. In fact, it was a single investigation into a group of straw purchasers, basically 18-year-old kids, who were put up by the Sinaloa cartel in Phoenix, Arizona, because they had clean criminal records, to go in and buy as many weapons as they could. ATF was watching these straw purchasers. ATF never provided the weapons. They never promoted the sale of the weapons. But they had no doubt that they were straw purchasers and that the guns were going to be used in illegal activity. But their single challenge was how, under the laws, could they stop them? And they were continuously told by prosecutors, really at every turn, that they didn't have probable cause to go ahead and seize the weapons and stop the purchasers.
They were observing the sale and purchase. They were not part of it.
They were not part of it, and that has been something that has been mistakenly reported now for a long time. They were never part of it in the Fast and Furious case. There was no effort to get more guns to the straw purchasers. The effort was to stop them, but the question was how.
Now, the Republicans claim ATF agents deliberately let over 2,000 guns walk as a result of Fast and Furious. Is that not true?
That is not accurate. Agents, in the course of their investigation and through shoe leather work, identified 2,045 guns that their suspects had purchased. They entered these guns and the serial numbers into a suspect gun database. But the fact of the matter is 75% of the guns in that database they never surveilled, they didn't know about until after the fact. 183 of those guns their suspects had purchased before the investigation even began.
Wow.
It was their diligence that led them to enter the over 2,000 serial numbers into the database, but now Congress is saying that's the number of guns that they walked or lost track of, and that simply is not true.
John Dodson, who testified before the committee, was a whistleblower. In the Fernandez case, in fact, your article says he, in fact, was one of the solid points of selling, of actually being involved in gun walking himself. He sold 6 AK Draco pistols to suspected gun traffickers, went on vacation without recovering the guns. Guns were never found. Suspect was never charged. Now, how significant is that?
Well, it's significant because Dodson and several of other agents he was allied with, who had a tremendous grudge against their supervisor, holds up as proof that guns were walked an email sent by their supervisor saying, "We're having friction in our group." Says nothing about gun walking. 1 month after he wrote that email, Dodson actually proposes a plan to walk guns in a completely separate investigation. Voth rejects his request. Dodson pushes. Voth submits it up to a supervisor. He finally gets approval. But in all of Group 7, John Dodson, who is Representative Ice's chief whistleblower, is the only agent who actually used taxpayer funds, purchased guns, and put them into the hands of a suspected trafficker.
So the main witness, the main whistleblower of what ATF agents were doing, John Dodson, was the only one that actually did this.
That is correct. And, you know, whatever your definition of gun walking, and there have been so many in the course of this investigation, that is really the most egregious example, that he actually procured the guns and put them into the hands of a trafficker. And there is no other example within Phoenix Group 7 of that occurring.
So the Attorney General of the United States, for the first time in history, is facing contempt, largely based on the word of one of the witnesses, this witness, who in fact is the only one that participated in a sale. So tell us, you've done 6 months investigating this, Fortune magazine. What's the bottom line that the American people should know from your investigation?
The bottom line is that the ATF agents in question did everything that they could to seize guns, and basically prosecutors determined that they didn't have grounds under the laws as written to seize most of the guns that wound up flowing ultimately to criminals. that is a far cry from guns being walked. You know, the fact of the matter is the agents and the prosecutors say that they were following the laws as written. So you can argue with the laws, but it's not a question of throwing the laws aside. That is not what occurred, nor is it the case that there was actually a tactical plan to walk guns, which is a claim that has now become fact.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Let me go back to you a minute, Congressman Schiff. You've heard what she has said after her investigation. If her investigation is true, and Fortune magazine has printed it, why are we so far away from the truth, and why is the American public led to believe there was this gun-walking operation when, in fact, it was not? I mean, how could this possibly happen, and why are we on the verge of holding the Attorney General in contempt?
Well, if those facts are correct, the reason why they haven't come to the surface until now is that's not really been the focus of the government reforms investigation. They haven't really been interested in how did guns so-called walk across the border, who was responsible, how did this idea come about, or did the idea in fact come about as has become popularly understood. I think that the way, in addition to this reporter's diligent work, that we're actually going to get to the bottom of this is not through the committee work, which is, you know, very now political and partisan in nature, but through the Inspector General investigation that the Attorney General himself got initiated. I would imagine the IG is looking into exactly the issues that have been raised today in your program, and that is, what were the origins, what were the agents trying to do? Was this a problem of not having probable cause to arrest, or was this a problem that frankly I've been working on, which is, even if you could make the arrests, are there charges that are sufficient to actually bring people to justice, to deter them, or to get them to roll over on higher-ups within the cartels? The penalties on these straw purchases are wholly inadequate, and many prosecutors may simply not want charges against straw purchasers because they can't get much of a sentence and they can't get much cooperation.
All right, Congressman, I'm going to have to hold it there. Thank you, Congressman Schiff, Dana Milbank, and Katherine Eban of Fortune magazine. Thank you for your time this evening. We'll be right back.